under the night sky of Broadway in New York, I clutched two $200 tickets to Hamilton, squirming in my seat the whole time. The mix of hip-hop lyrics and historical figures pulled me out of the moment from start to finish, and even the audience member next to me kept checking their watch. During intermission, I could have easily gotten up and headed to the restaurant next door for a relaxing dinner, but I ended up sitting right back down. I already spent $400 on these tickets. I thought, at least I should finish the show so it's not a waste. After the curtain fell, I walked out exhausted and kicking myself, wondering why we keep wasting time on something we know is terrible, all because of money we've already spent. The answer lies in the sunk cost fallacy, the force that dictates so many of our decisions. What is the sunk cost fallacy? An explanation from economics to psychology. Sunk costs started as an economic term, referring to investments that have already been made and can't be recovered. That could be money, time, even emotion, or energy. The sunk cost fallacy, though, is when we let those irrecoverable past investments drive our decisions instead of rationally weighing future benefits. The result? We end up making bad calls, like drinking expired milk just because you don't want to waste some money on it, or clinging to a project that's clearly going nowhere just because you already put so much into it. From a psychological standpoint, two key forces fuel the sunk cost fallacy: loss aversion and cognitive dissonance. Daniel Kahneman, the Nobel Prize-winning economist, laid out in his prospect theory that the pain we feel from losses is 2.5 times stronger than the pleasure we get from gains. Take the Broadway example. The fear of wasting $400 felt way bigger than the relief of leaving early to relax. So we'd rather suffer through the show than admit the money was already gone. Cognitive dissonance adds another layer. That's when our actions clash with our beliefs, like thinking, I paid a fortune for these tickets, but the show is terrible. To fix that inner conflict, we adjust our behavior. I'll keep watching becomes a way to tell ourselves it's not that bad, so we don't have to face the fact that buying those tickets was a mistake. One important note, not all past investments count as sunk costs, only the ones you can't get back. Say you're taking a class at NYU and already paid $3,000 in tuition. If you drop out and can't get that tuition refunded, that $3,000 is a sunk cost. But if you can transfer the class and get part of the tuition back, only the unrecovered portion counts. It's that can't get it back factor that makes us fixate on not giving up. The sunk cost fallacy in Western scenarios, from daily spending to national policy. Consumer choices, gym memberships, and the anxiety of wasting what you paid for. In the U.S., buy an annual gym membership, but never using it, is the most common everyday example of the sunk cost fallacy. Surveys from gym chains like Planet Fitness and 24 Hour Fitness show that about 70% of people who buy annual memberships swear they'll go at least 3 times a week, but in reality, they average fewer than 2 visits a month. Mark, a programmer in Los Angeles, complained to me once, I dropped $800 on an annual membership. The first month, I stuck with it, but then I started working more overtime, and I just didn't have the time anymore. But every time I see the gym charge on my bank statement, I think, if I don't go, I'm wasting money. So sometimes I'll drag myself there on weekends and end up even more tired. Why not cancel the annual membership and switch to a monthly one? Mark's answer is classic. The annual membership is 40% cheaper than paying monthly. If I cancel, that $800 I already spent is just gone. What he didn't calculate, a monthly membership would cost $50, so he'd only spend $600 a year, and he could pause it whenever he wanted. But the sunk cost fallacy trapped in a cycle. To avoid wasting the money I already spent, I'll keep wasting my future time and energy. That's the hidden trap in consumer choices. We fixate on what we already lost instead of what we could gain later. The workplace and entrepreneurship. Silicon Valley's fear of failure trap. In Silicon Valley startup culture, persistence is hailed as a virtue, but the sunk cost fallacy often turns that persistence into stubbornness. In 2022, a VR startup in San Francisco landed $20 million in funding to build a metaverse social platform. But during product testing, user feedback was brutal. The interface was confusing, the app kept crashing, and user retention was under 5%. The founder should have pivoted or shut the project down, but instead, he poured another $10 million into updating the product. His reasoning? We've already spent $20 million. If we quit now, all that R&D and teamwork will be for nothing. In the end, the company went bankrupt in 2023, and investors lost big. When the team looked back later, one member said, "Every meeting, the founder would talk about how much we've already put in, but he barely ever asked, what do users actually need?" That's cognitive dissonance at work. The founder couldn't admit he'd picked the wrong direction, so he threw more money at the problem to prove he was right and dug himself deeper. This isn't a one-off in Silicon Valley, either. According to Forbes, about 40% of startups fail because they cling too hard to sunk costs and refuse to cut their losses. Public policy. The F-35's billion-dollar sunk cost. In U.S. public policy, the most iconic example of the sunk cost fallacy is the F-35 Joint Strike Fighter program. Back in the 1990s, the Department of Defense wanted to build a multi-role fighter jet that could work for the Air Force, Navy, and Marine Corps. The initial budget was around $233 billion. But as the project dragged on, problems piled up, endless software glitches, repeated engine failures, and the cost per aircraft skyrocketed from $50 million to $130 million. In 2010, some lawmakers proposed pausing the project to reevaluate, but the Pentagon shot that down. Their argument? We've already poured billions into this. If we hit pause, all that R&D money, factory construction, and staff training will be useless. So the project kept going. By 2024, total spending on the F-35 had topped $1.7 trillion, and future maintenance costs will only add to that. The kicker? Internal U.S. military reports say the F-35's real-world performance doesn't live up to expectations. It's even less effective than some older fighter jets. This is a sunk cost fallacy on a national scale. When decisions involve huge public funds and national pride, admitting you're wrong feels too costly, and the chains of sunk costs get even harder to break. Relationships, the obsession with not wasting 5 years of my life. The sunk cost fallacy also shows up big in how many young Westerners approach dating and relationships. A survey from a U.S. dating site, OkCupid, found that 30% of respondents had stayed in an incompatible relationship because they'd invested too much time. Emily, a woman in New York, has a story that fits this perfectly. She'd been with her boyfriend for 5 years, from college graduation to starting their careers. They rented an apartment together, got a pet, even planned their wedding. But as time went on, she realized he was irresponsible and constantly brushed off her feelings. They talked about it again and again, but nothing changed, and still, she couldn't bring herself to break up. "I keep thinking," Emily said, "I gave 5 years of my youth to this relationship. If I break up now, all that effort will be gone, right?" It wasn't until he forgot her birthday and brushed it off with, "I was busy at work," that she finally woke up. "I wasn't holding on to a relationship. I was holding on to the time I'd already spent on it." She ended up breaking up with him. It hurt at first, but later she wrote in her journal, "Admitting I made a wrong choice back then is way easier than wasting the next 5 years of my life." That obsession with not wasting past investments keeps so many people stuck in unhealthy relationships, forgetting that future time is the one worth valuing. Breaking free from the sunk cost trap. 3 keys to rational decision-making. The sunk cost fallacy isn't unbeatable. The key is learning to let go of the past and focus on the future. Based on psychological research and real-life examples, here are 3 ways to make more rational choices. First, replace past investment thinking with future benefit thinking. When you're making a decision, ask yourself, if I hadn't already put in this time/money/energy, would I still choose to keep going? For that bad Broadway show, if you didn't have tickets, would you walk into the theater voluntarily? For that failing project, if you hadn't spent any money yet, would you invest in it now? This question helps you tune out sunk costs and focus on whether the future is worth it. Second, accept that bad decisions are normal to cut down on cognitive dissonance. A lot of us refuse to cut our losses because we're scared to admit I was wrong. But the truth is, no one makes perfect decisions every time. Buying the wrong tickets, investing in the wrong project, dating the wrong person. These are all part of life. Elon Musk, the U.S. entrepreneur, once said, "I've made countless mistakes, like the early Tesla Roadster having a ton of issues, but I never refuse to fix them just because we already put money into R&D." Admitting you're wrong is how you avoid bigger losses. When we stop seeing cutting losses as failing and start seeing it as correcting a mistake, we'll stop fixating on sunk costs. Third, look at the problem from a third-party perspective. When we're stuck in the sunk cost fallacy, we're too close to the situation to think clearly. So ask yourself, if a friend was in this spot, what advice would I give them? If your friend had a gym membership they never used, you'd probably say, "Stop forcing yourself. Switch to a monthly membership, it's cheaper." If your friend was stuck in a bad relationship, you'd tell them, "Break up already, don't waste more time." Using a friend's rationality to fight your own emotional bias helps you break free from sunk costs. Make peace with the past to embrace the future. Going back to that night on Broadway, if I could do it over, I'd stand up and leave during intermission. The $400 in tickets was already gone, but I could have used the rest of the night to enjoy a good meal or walk around and take a New York skyline, instead of suffering through the show. The heart of the sunk cost fallacy is that we hold on to the past too tightly, forgetting that the future is what we can change. Whether consumer choices, work, relationships, or even national policy, when we learn to ignore sunk costs and focus on future benefits, we'll make smarter decisions. After all, life isn't a race to not waste the past. It's a journey to cherish the future. Break free from the shackles of sunk costs, travel light, and move toward a more worthwhile future.